everyone, and welcome to the Healthy Living Happy Life podcast, the podcast that helps women navigate midlife and menopause and rediscover who they are and create their best life yet. Yes, that's what we do here. I'm Denise Stegall. I am your host, and I am so glad you are here with me today. So let me ask you something. I'm just going to just jump right in today. Do you ever feel like you're constantly being pushed to do things that you don't even really want to do? You say yes out of obligation, especially when there are parts of you that are screaming, no, I don't really want to do this. But you say yes anyway, and you smile and you're like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. No big deal. And you're miserable because you do that. Yeah. Let's be real though. This pressure starts to feel really, really heavy when it comes to this midlife time, this menopause time. Our body's changing. We don't have the energy we used to. Our responsibilities start to feel overwhelming because we keep saying yes to things. And sometimes it just feels like you're kind of running like a Tesla on self-drive mode, right? The reality of crashing is pretty real, right? Just saying. What if you don't have to be pushed all the time? What if instead you could be pulled towards something that actually excites you, something that fulfills you and makes you feel lighter and happier and brings you joy? This is the concept of we call it the push-pull shift. And this is a concept from Positive Intelligence, which was written by Shirzad Chamine a handful of years ago. And it's something that he has studied with CEOs and big companies and individuals and coaches alike. And truly, this is something that almost all of us, especially women in midlife, are going through. We don't even realize it until it gets just overwhelming. So, with this, you can really set boundaries and start living a life that feels more authentic. Right. When you say yes to things that aren't really that important to you and you just kind of show up, what's the point? Right. Yes, you've said yes. So you're there, you show up for your obligations. But if you're really not excited about it, you're really just wasting your time and really kind of wasting not so much the time of the people that you're helping or going to, but you're not there in the best of faith, let me say. So the image that I think of when I think of this push pull thing, and this may be helpful, it may not, but this is the image that I first got in my head when I first heard about this. Now, when I was a child and I was learning how to swim, getting pushed into the pool felt bad. It made me angry and it made me resentful. And I didn't want to go in the pool, even though I really wanted to go in the pool, right? Little kids are weird that way. However, if my mom and dad were in the pool and they were encouraging me, kind of gently, pulling me, maybe holding my hands and gently getting me closer and closer to the edge of the pool, what did I do? Jumped right in, right? Because I was gently being pulled towards something that I actually wanted to do, as opposed to pushed in a way that made me feel like this isn't something I wanted. So that is the image that I have when it comes to push and pull. And maybe there's something that comes to your mind, and I would certainly love to hear that. So if something like that comes to mind, I really would love to hear that in the comments. Send me a note either on the podcast or shoot me an email at support@denisestegall.com. We'd absolutely love to hear what you have to say there. So let me explain it a little bit differently. Like I said, that was the image that I got when I first heard about this concept. But what it actually means, so being pushed means doing things out of obligation because you should. And how many times do we should on ourselves, right? And it's out of expectations. People think we're just going to always say yes. Well, if we've always said yes in the past, of course, that's what they're going to think, right? Um, and that's kind of our fault, right? It's not really their fault if we've always said, okay, sure, yeah, I'll go do that. Oh, sure, I'll go pick up the kids today. Oh, sure, I'll go pick up the kids today. And eventually, it all of a sudden, it's your responsibility, right? So being pulled, though, means that you're being guided with something that genuinely excites you, the things that light you up inside. Now, granted, if, picking up the kids is, you probably have to pick the kids up from school, but still, that may not excite you. It might be more exciting to leave them there. Okay, I'm kidding. Don't leave your children at school, or your grandkids at this point, right? But it really is, the concept really is about, being pulled toward things that are um, fun and interesting, that you find creative, or just literally something that lights you up, right? So Shazad Chamin from Positive Intelligence, he puts it this way. He says this all the time. Your mind can be your best friend or your worst enemy. And learning to quiet mental saboteurs that push you and amplify a more sage, a more positive mindset that pulls you is the key to happiness. And get this one, to success, right? If we want to be successful in our career, if we want to be successful in whatever it is we want to be successful at, it really needs to be something that is pulling us. I remember when I was first out of college and I was working at a job that I didn't really love. It didn't light me up. It paid the bills, right? But then once I started coaching, years later, I found coaching. I kept being drawn more and more into, nutrition and mindset and all of these things that I still just find absolutely fascinating. Okay, it's a lot different than when I used to work in an office, typing and doing stuff for other people. That just was not exciting at all. I mean, truly, it was actually kind of boring. But anyway, when you stop listening to those external pressures that push you, right? And you start tuning in to those things that inspire you. And a lot of times in midlife, we've forgotten what those things are, right? Life becomes easier though when we start tuning into those things that inspire us, those things that we love, more meaningful, basically more you. So for example, for me, I was a dancer when I was young. I started dancing, I was probably 2 or 3 years old, and I danced all the way through high school. And then I went to college. I was on the fencing team and I did some other stuff and I got busy. And then life happened, right? Well, one of the things that I love to do is dance. I haven't danced in years. Yeah, at a wedding here and there, or a party, whatever. But what I started to do is on days where I'm home and maybe I'm making lunch or maybe I'm making dinner, turn on some music, and I'm dancing around the kitchen. And, oh my gosh, I feel like myself, like I haven't felt in years. It's really, really exciting. I'll probably look really ridiculous, but that's okay. Anyway, so, but doesn't this sound good, right? Shifting, making this shift could really um, enhance our life, especially, during menopause. People always say, talk about menopause. Now, think about it. This is a long phase in life. Okay, ladies, most of us are going to live like 30 years plus post menopause, but we talk about menopause, which is actually only one day of your life. That's it. Menopause is like a long phase. Starts with perimenopause, in your, we'll just say 40s. For some people, it does start in their mid 30s, right? That's a long time. And so it goes till you have that one anniversary, no menses for 12 months. Then that's your menopause day. And then you're postmenopausal. Well, guess what? At 50, I'm 53. I'm 3 years postmenopausal. Um, my life expectancy at this time is at least 85. That's another 32 years that I'm going to live. So you bet your bottom dollar that I want to live a life that excites me, right? You too? Yeah, I know, I can hear you. So, you know, menopause is just so much more than all of the physical symptoms. And there's a litany of them, right, ladies? But it really is a huge emotional transition too. And I don't think we really understand that until we're kind of in the thick of it. And our partners really have no idea. So this is something you really should talk to them about. But what I find, it's really a time of rediscovery. Now, if you're in your 50s, say, kids are probably in high school, maybe in college, or getting ready to go to college. You have a little bit more time for you, right? But what happens, and this is what I work on with many of my clients, is I kind of feel stuck. maybe they've had a career, maybe they've been a stay-at-home mom, maybe they've done a little of both. But they've been kind of going through the motions. And these routines that they did, now granted, it was because the kids were young and they had to do all these things for the kids and, grow the family and all that fun stuff, right? You kind of, once you have a kid, you kind of have to do that. Right? But at some point, it's not fulfilling anymore. The kids are off doing their own things, right? They may not even come home for dinner anymore because they're involved in school activities or whatever. And if they're away at college, guess what? They're only coming home a couple times a year. So, you may be stuck in some of these routines. Maybe you're even still stuck in obligations, even though the kids aren't around anymore. You're still on the PTA. Okay. If your kids aren't in school anymore, you don't need to be on the PTA. You may love it. No, you don't. Right? That's the problem. You say oh yeah, but I've done it forever. But is it really serving you? So what we find is women kind of get stuck in this version of themselves that's no longer them. That was them when they were in their 30s, maybe their early 40s. And now that we're in our 50s, 60s plus, right? We're somebody else, right? I always say every 10 years, you're a little bit different. Not that you're a completely different person, but every 10 years, you've learned things, you've experienced different things, you've read different things. So, you really do every 10 years, every decade change, right? And sometimes change can be hard, change can be exhausting, change could be exhilarating. But again, if it's pulling you, if you're being pulled to things that are exciting, things that make you want these changes, that's great. So, what are some of the things that you could potentially want? Healthier boundaries. And that just doesn't mean about what you're eating and how you're exercising. I mean, boundaries with people who love and trust, where, you say no every now and then, right? Setting boundaries just basically teaches people how to treat you, right? How often do you say, you kind of throw up your hands and go, I feel like, a welcome mat here. People are always stepping on me. Well, that's a really big sign to say, okay, we need to set some boundaries here, right? So when you're being pulled to do more exciting things that are more you at this stage of life, boundaries are important. It truly helps increase your energy because, of course, we know energy is waning a bit, as we've gotten older. But when you set those boundaries, you give yourself more time, one, to maybe rest or rejuvenate, meditate, take the time that you need for you, right? So then you have the energy to do the things that you really love to do. And of course, when you are doing that, you bring joy to your life. And when you are happy and you're joyous and other people see that, you're giving them joy too. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that sounds fabulous. You can tell if you're watching me, I'm getting so excited about it because I love to do certain things. And I love when we talk about joy and bringing joy to others just by being ourselves, right? So how do you go though from this lifetime, possibly, of being pushed all the time to getting pulled? It starts with something so simple and so connected to who we are. That is our core values. Now, I know we talk about those quite frequently because if we don't know what our core values are, if we don't know what's important to us, then how can we how can we get pulled in a direction if we don't know what direction we should be getting pulled into? Because then we end up still in that cycle of getting pushed to do things that we may not want to do. And again, we want to focus on our core values. Sometimes it's to rediscover what they are, right? At this stage, if your kids are grown and out of the house, yes, you're still mom, but your biggest core value isn't to make sure your kids are home and have a snack at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever. I have no idea where that came from. But when it comes to searching your soul and figuring out what are my core values, you want to do this in a way where you're kind of pulled in a very eager way, not pushed to do it. So I'm not saying you must do this. it is something that will help you in this transition. Because your actions, when you know what those core values are, your actions are going to align with them, and everything's going to feel much more authentic. You're going to feel so much more like the person you used to be, right? When you before, when you were single and before you had kids and before you had a big busy career and the big house and all of the bills and all of that nonsense, right? Right. Remember who you used to be and the things that you used to love, the things that used to light you up. Maybe they still light you up now, right? So again, when it comes to being more authentic and fulfilling, there are things that we're going to be doing for ourselves. One of the things that I find, many of my clients will say, you know what, I'm sleeping better. Maybe hot flashes or whatever, they still get them here and there, but they're sleeping better because they're not constantly stressed about doing all these things. Their to-do list is smaller because they've said no to things that don't align with their values. So think about that. When you're busy and you're doing all these things, your sleep is one of the first things to go. It's the first thing to suffer. And we know in menopause, we need our sleep. We need to make sure that all of our hormones that are going crazy in our bodies anyway, we can balance them as much, or harmonize them, let's just say, as much as possible. If we're not sleeping, we're increasing our cortisol levels. If we're increasing our cortisol levels, we're going to start to gain weight. We gain weight, we feel bad about ourselves. Also, the hormones that help us decide if we're hungry or not, those get a little wacky. And so, like, there becomes this whole big vicious cycle just from not sleeping. So, aligning with the things that you love and the things that you want to do and accomplish in your life will help you sleep better. So, I believe it's a bit of a ripple effect, right? And kind of like how I said about, how all of the hormones, like once one starts to go, you just, the next thing happens, the next thing happens, the next thing happens. But this is something that happens in a positive way. Once you start aligning with your core values, doing the things that you love to do and that you want to do. Um, so I always love to find some kind of quote from a doctor, a physician, a medical institution. And the ones that I find more and more that are interesting. Now, I use Mayo Clinic a lot because I live in Rochester, Minnesota. Mayo Clinic is 6 miles down the road. Or Cleveland Clinic. I don't know why. I was in Cleveland a few years ago. It's a beautiful place. I know a couple of docs there. So I tend to use some of their, when I look for their research. So the Cleveland Clinic says, the big clinic, not just one person there, apparently the whole clinic, says that women who manage stress through mindfulness and value-driven choices usually report fewer hot flashes and have more energy. So this is great. When you're making these choices because you're making decisions based on your core values, you're gonna have fewer hot flashes and increase your energy. Why? Because you're sleeping better. Ha ha ha. That's like a double win, right? Win-win. So a couple of it's a couple of things that I think is kind of interesting. My one client, Laura, who is 58, when she came to me, she, has she's got a great job, demanding. She's caring for her aging parents, and she just said to me, she's just overwhelmed by everything. So during our conversation, there was a little bit more to it. I asked her, so what matters to you? And she looked at me kind of deer in the headlight, and she initially couldn't answer my question. I don't even think it registered because no one had asked her that in years. But after thinking about it for a little bit, she said, she came back to me with two things: creativity and connection. She loved to paint, and she was really good. She was a really good painter. And she said, but I haven't picked up a paintbrush in years. So with that, we started to kind of think about, what could she do to follow this desire of painting and being and this connection, because obviously work and parents just was not filling that bucket for her. So what she decided to do was she decided to take a class once a week So one, she was painting, and two, she was in a room with people, like-minded people who loved to paint also. So talk about like win-win there, right? She set some boundaries. This was her time. She set some boundaries with work because a lot of times she'd say, "Oh, well, I don't know if I can do that, every week because of work." Nope, she set a boundary with work. This is what I'm doing. And she actually, even though this was really hard, she actually set some boundaries with her aging parents because they would call and she would run. Well, they didn't need her all the time. Like they would call and she would say, "Okay, I will be there. I will be there." But she stopped dropping everything and running over, which was great because she said to me later on, she's like, "This is life changing. I feel better. I'm sleeping better. I'm happy again." Happy again. Oh my gosh. Wouldn't we all just love to be happy again? I'm a pretty happy person anyway. But there's definitely times in my life where I was not really happy when I was working in jobs that did not light me up, right? Living in a place that kind of was like, it was okay, right? So the power of focusing on what pulls you is astounding. Push pull, let's just, I'm just going to give you a couple of other examples where this can affect your life. So, like I mentioned with Laura, work, right? With her parents, setting those boundaries there. But think about this. How many times do you say yes to a social event, even though you're tired and even though it's really not something that you're that interested in? I was recently invited to an event at the library. And it's a very nice library. I have a friend who works there. But I don't have children, right? So a lot of the things that they do at the library are for kids. So it's just not something that makes sense for me. But initially I thought, oh, well, that would be nice. It'd be a nice evening out. And, but it didn't align with my core values and the things that drove me, right? That were pulling me. So I said, thank you for the invitation, but I'm not going to be able to make it. That's it. I didn't explain anything more, and that was it. So I guess the question for you is, how many times are you saying yes to things that you're not interested in? And the day that it happens, you're grumbling and you're not happy about it, and you kind of show up in a bit of a bad mood. Nobody wants to show up in a bad mood. Nobody wants you to show up in a bad mood, right? So another area where menopausal women and middle-aged women really struggle, and this is something that I talk about here and there, is about exercise. um, I have a client who, she's always been a gym rat. Okay. She loves going to the gym. I personally hate going to the gym. I have a gym in my house for a reason, and I love to run outside for a reason. Anyway, but so she would go to the gym 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm still sleeping at 5 o'clock in the morning. Sorry about that. Just that's never happening. Um, and she would take these classes. She would take boot camp classes. Now some people love those. I don't love those. And she didn't actually love those, but she was there and she thought, well, this is probably what I need to do. She would go to these classes and sometimes she would actually get injured. And she said, when I got my client had said to me, well, sometimes when I've gotten injured, I kind of felt relieved because then she didn't have to go. Well, that said something to me. So I asked her, I said, well, what do you like to do to work out instead, or exercise or move? I love the word movement rather than exercise. Exercise sounds like something we have to do, right? And we're more apt to do something we want to do as opposed to something we have to do, hence push pull, right? So like me, she loved to dance. So she decided that she was going to take a dance class. I thought that was amazing. She took a belly dancing class. God bless her. That would not have been the type of class that I initially would have gone for, but she did, and she loved it. She felt alive. She felt like she was having fun for the first time in a long time. And, she was keeping up with her strength training because when ladies, we need to make sure that we're doing our strength training in this stage of life because we want to make sure that we're maintaining muscle mass, lean muscle mass, but also bone density. So, yes, she was still doing that. But a couple of days a week, she was going to a dance class and having a blast. So, again, push pull. She was being pushed initially to take these classes, these exercise classes that she hated, where she would get injured. Been there, done that, by the way. Instead, started to take these other classes, this dance class that she just ended up loving. So I hope you see the difference there, right? Shifting from push to pull. Everything changes when you start getting pulled to do things. Your time, you have more time, you have more energy, you feel lighter. Even, I mean, happiness and joy through the roof. So when it comes to menopause, we often think, oh, this is, the rest of my life or the end of my life, the end of my, like I said, I mean, I'm going to be at least 32 more years post menopause. So menopause is not an end. Yes, it's an end of a phase of our lives, but it's the beginning of something new and exciting, something that you can create by being pulled to the things that you love. And of course, you don't have to do that alone, right? But think about this. Imagine like waking up every day, you're energized, you're full of joy, you're not overwhelmed anymore, and you just love life. You wake up and you're like, oh, this is going to be a great day. Another great day. Oh, darn, another great day, right? Sounds amazing, right? So it's kind of a big shift, but it does take a little bit of time. And yes, of course, you don't have to do it alone. That's why I'm here. If this is something that you are interested in really looking at and trying to get your life more balanced and have more pull and less push, please attend one of my monthly menopause wellness series. I call it From Hormones to Harmony, because we know at this stage balance is tough, but we need to have some harmony in our life, so we can enjoy the things that we're doing, the things that we are being pulled and drawn to do. So in the menopause wellness series, we cut through the myths, the BS, when it comes to menopause, and we focus on actually what works, what's true, and we have a conversation. Sure, I do a little bit of teaching, but then we open it up and we ask questions. No question is silly, too big, too small. If I don't have an answer right then and there, I will go find an answer and get back to a person, because this is what I do. It's what I love. It is what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about helping you live your best life. Along with all of this information, we are going to laugh, because yes, humor is definitely part of the healing process or the moving forward process. So please join us, or join me. It's usually the first week of the month. But if you're looking for more personalized attention, of course, please feel free to schedule a strategy call with me. Links to both will be in the show notes. And truly, let's figure out how to get you from being pushed to everything to feeling pulled toward a life that truly lights you up. Thank you for listening, everyone. I'm Denise Stegall. If you've enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this. Until next time, I leave you with this: healthy living, happy life.